with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds." Quote, Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was born February 12, 1809, in a single-room log cabin, Hardin County, Kentucky. His family upbringing was modest. His parents from Virginia were neither wealthy or well-known. At an early age, the young Abraham lost his mother, and his father moved away to Indiana. Abraham had to work hard splitting logs and other manual labor. But he also had a thirst for knowledge and worked very hard to excel in his studies. This led him to become self-trained as a lawyer. He spent 8 years working on the Illinois court circuit. His ambition, drive, and capacity for hard work were evident to all around him. Lincoln became respected on the legal circuit and he gained the nickname, Honest Abe. He often encouraged neighbors to mediate their own conflicts rather than pursue full legal litigation. Lincoln also had a good sense of humor and was deprecating about his looks. "If I were two-faced, would I be wearing this one?" Quote, work colleagues and friends noted that Lincoln had a capacity to diffuse tense and argumentative situations, though the use of humor and his capacity to take an optimistic view of human nature. He loved to tell stories to illustrate a serious point through the use of humor and parables. Lincoln was shy around women, but after a difficult courtship, he married Mary Todd in 1842. Mary Todd shared many of her husband's political thinking, but they also had different temperaments, with Mary more prone to swings in her emotions. They had 4 children, who Lincoln was devoted to, although 3 died before reaching maturity, which caused much grief to both parents. As a lawyer, Abraham developed a capacity for quick thinking and oratory. His interest in public issues encouraged him to stand for public office. In 1847, he was elected to the House of Representatives for Illinois and served from 1847 to 49. During his period in Congress, Lincoln criticized President Polk's handling of the American-Mexican War, arguing Polk used patriotism and military glory to defend the unjust action of taking Mexican territory. However, Lincoln's stance was politically unpopular and he was not re-elected. A lawyer. After his political career appeared to be over, he returned to working as a lawyer in Illinois. However, the 1850s saw the slavery question re-emerge as a prominent divisive national issue. Lincoln abhorred slavery and from a political perspective wished to prevent slavery being extended and ultimately be phased out. He gave influential speeches, which drew on the Declaration of Independence to prove the Founding Fathers had intended to stop the spread of slavery. In particular, Lincoln used a novel argument that although society was a long way from equality, America should aspire towards the lofty statement in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Lincoln had a strong capacity for empathy. He would try to see problems from everyone's point of view, including Southern slaveholders. He used this concept of empathy to speak against slavery. "I have always thought that all men should be free, but if any should be slaves, it should be first those who desire it for themselves, and secondly, those who desire it for others. When I hear anyone arguing for slavery, I feel a strong impulse to see it tried on him personally." Quote, Lincoln's speeches were notable because they drew on both legal precedents but also easy-to-understand parables, which struck a chord with the public. In 1858, Lincoln was nominated as Republican candidate for the Senate. He undertook a series of high-profile debates with the Democratic incumbent Stephen Douglass. Douglass was in favor of allowing the extension of slavery, if citizens voted for it. Lincoln opposed the extension of slavery. During this campaign, he gave one of his best-remembered speeches, which reflected on the divisive nature of America. "A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure, permanently, half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other. House divided." In this house divided speech, Lincoln gave a prophetic utterance to the potential for slavery to divide the nation. Although he lost this 1858 Senate election, his debating skills and oratory caused him to become well known within the Republican Party. On February 27, 1860, Lincoln was also invited to give a notable address at Cooper Union in New York. The East Coast was relatively new territory for Lincoln. Many in the audience thought his appearance awkward and even ugly, but his calls for moral clarity over the wrongness of slavery struck a chord with his East Coast audience. "Let us have faith that right makes might, and in that faith, let us, to the end, dare to do our duty as we understand it." Cooper Union Address. The reputation he gained on the campaign trail and speeches on the East Coast caused him to be put forward as a candidate for the Republican nominee for president in 1860. Lincoln was an outsider because he had much less experience than other leading candidates such as Stewart, Bates and Chase, but after finishing second on the first ballot he went on to become unexpectedly nominated. After a hard-fought, divisive campaign of 1860, Lincoln was elected the first Republican president of the United States. Lincoln's support came entirely from the North and West of the country. The South strongly disagreed with Lincoln's position on slavery. The election of Lincoln as president in 1861 sparked the South to secede from the North. Southern independence sentiment had been growing for many years, and the election of a president opposed to slavery was the final straw. However, Lincoln resolutely opposed the breakaway of the South, and this led to the American Civil War with Lincoln committed to preserving the Union. Lincoln surprised many by including in his cabinet the main rivals from the 1860 Republican campaign. It demonstrated Lincoln's willingness and ability to work with people of different political and personal approaches. This helped to keep the Republican Party together. The Civil War was much more costly than many people anticipated, and at times Lincoln appeared to be losing the support of the general population. But Lincoln's patient leadership and willingness to work with Unionist Democrats held the country together. Lincoln oversaw many of the military aspects of the war and promoted the General Ulysses S. Grant to command the Northern forces. Initially, the war was primarily about the secession of Southern states and the survival of the Union, but as the war progressed, Lincoln increasingly made the issue of ending slavery paramount. On September 22, 1862, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation that declared the freedom of slaves within the Confederacy. All persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free. Emancipation Proclamation. The proclamation came into force on January 1, 1863. Towards the end of the year, many black regiments were raised to help the Union Army. Gettysburg Address. After a difficult opening 2 years, by 1863, the tide of war started to swing towards the Union forces, helped by the victory at the Battle of Gettysburg in July 1863. Lincoln felt able to redefine the goals of the Civil War to include the ending of slavery. Dedicating the ceremony at Gettysburg on November 19, 1863, Lincoln declared, "407 years ago our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." Quote, eventually, after 4 years of attrition, the federal forces secured the surrender of the defeated South. The Union had been saved and the issue of slavery had been brought to a head. After the Civil War. In the aftermath of the Civil War, Lincoln sought to reunite the country, offering a generous settlement to the South. When asked how to deal with the Southern states, Lincoln replied, "Let 'em up easy." Lincoln was opposed by more radical factions who wanted greater activism in the South to ensure civil rights for freed slaves. On January 31, 1865, Lincoln helped pass through Congress a bill to outlaw slavery. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution was officially signed into law on December 6, 1865. Some Northern abolitionists and Republicans wanted Lincoln to go further and implement full racial equality on issues of education and voting rights. Lincoln was unwilling to do this. It was a minority political view for the time. Frederick Douglass, a leading black activist, who had escaped from slavery, didn't always agree with the policies of Lincoln, but after meeting Lincoln, he said enthusiastically of the president, "He treated me as a man. He did not let me feel for a moment that there was any difference in the color of our skins. The president is a most remarkable man. I am satisfied now that he is doing all that circumstances will permit him to do." Quote, assassination. 5 days after the surrender of Robert E. Lee and the Confederate Army, Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth while visiting Ford's Theater. Lincoln's death was widely mourned across the country. Posterity. Lincoln is widely regarded as one of America's most influential and important presidents. As well as saving the Union and promoting Republican values, Lincoln was viewed as embodying the ideals of honesty and integrity. Key facts about Abraham Lincoln. Bouncing back from failure. Lincoln's life was notable for numerous setbacks and personal misfortune. Lincoln failed in business in 1831 and again in 1833. He was defeated for the legislature in 1832, defeated for speaker in 1838, defeated for elector in 1840. Lincoln was defeated for Congress in 1843 and 1848. Defeated for Senate in 1855 and 1858. Defeated for Vice President in 1856. He suffered a nervous breakdown in 1836. His mother died when he was 9. His beloved sister Sarah died from childbirth in 1821. He also had younger brother Tommy, who died 3 days old. His first love Anne Rutledge died of typhoid fever in 1835. He also saw 2 of his young sons die, Edward and Willie Lincoln, 1862. I have been driven many times upon my knees by the overwhelming conviction that I had nowhere else to go. My own wisdom and that of all about me seemed insufficient for that day. Quote, appearance. Lincoln was noted for his unusual, ugly looks. Walt Whitman gives a typical description on seeing Lincoln. Lincoln has a face like a Hoosier Michelangelo, so awful ugly it becomes beautiful, with its strange mouth, its deep cut, criss-cross lines, and its donut complexion. Quote, height. Lincoln was tall, 6 inches 4, and relatively thin. A neighbor in New Salem said of Lincoln he was thin as a beanpole and ugly as a scarecrow. Quote, weight. Most sources suggest around 180 pounds. During his presidency, he is believed to have lost weight. Beard. Lincoln was the first president to wear a beard. He grew a beard after an 11-year-old girl, Grace Bedell, wrote a letter in the fall of 1860 saying that he would be more charming with whiskers. "For you would look a great deal better, for your face is so thin." Lincoln replied to her letter and started to grow a beard. Letter. In the 1990s, the original letter was sold for $1 million. Personal life. Lincoln was born in a one-room log cabin in Kentucky on the western frontier. He was named Abraham Lincoln after his paternal grandfather, who was a military captain in the American Revolution and was killed by Native Americans in 1786. In 1816, his family moved to an unbroken forest in Indiana, a non-slaveholding territory. Lincoln had 2 brushes with death. 1816 he was saved from drowning. 1819 he was kicked unconscious by a horse. Lincoln read late into the night to improve his own education. He sought out any good books he could read. In 1825, he left a borrowed book on George Washington out in the rain. The farmer Josiah Crawford made Lincoln work for 2 days to pay off the costs of damage to the book. Lincoln abstained from alcohol and tobacco throughout his life. Lincoln supported the temperance movement, though he also suggested the temperance movement would be more successful if it concentrated less on denunciation and more an emphatic, sympathetic understanding of those who drink. Lincoln became very close to his stepmother Sarah, Sally, Bush Johnson, who his father remarried. His stepmother helped to reinvigorate the family home after finding it in a state of disrepair. He was not close to his father and did not attend his funeral. Lincoln was physically strong, adept at using an axe. However, he was said to be not keen on manual labor. Until he was 21, he had to give all earnings to his father. It gave him a natural empathy for those who could not keep the fruits of their labor. Up until 1827, Lincoln earned no more than 31 cents per day for manual labor. He once ferried 2 passengers halfway across the Ohio River, and he was tossed 2 half-dollar coins, saying, "It was a most important incident in my life. I could scarcely credit that I, a poor boy, had earned $1 in less than a day. Ellipsis. The world seemed wider and fairer before me." Quote, Lincoln volunteered for the Army during the Black Hawk War, though he never saw action. On one occasion during the Black Hawk War, he saved the life of a Potawatomi, a native Indian who wandered into this camp. His men wanted to kill him, but Lincoln intervened to prevent this. In 1832, Lincoln opened a general store in New Salem, Illinois. It proved a commercial failure. Lincoln liked to talk politics to customers, and his partner drank heavily, building up debts. After his business failed in 1833, he was left with debts of $1,100. He avoided bankruptcy and referred to it as his national debt. He eventually paid it off. Lincoln worked at various jobs: farm hand, rail splitter, county surveyor, lawyer, boatman, general store manager, New Salem postmaster, speaker. Lincoln became an adept boatman, making long trips down the major rivers of Mississippi, Illinois, and Ohio. Lincoln is the only president to successfully apply for a patent, No. 6469. His device was to help boats stuck on sandbanks. As president, he earned $25,000 a year. On his death, he left no will and had an estate of $82,000. He married Mary Todd in 1842. Lincoln was not confident around women, stating once, "I can never be satisfied with anyone who would be blockhead enough to have me." Quote, a lawyer. Lincoln attended school for less than a year. Lincoln was an entirely self-taught lawyer, learning from Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England. Lincoln was admitted to the bar in 1836. Lincoln's law practices were based in Springfield, Illinois. Lincoln and his partners handled over 5,000 cases, from murder charges to civil and railroad cases. Lincoln took one case to the U.S. Supreme Court, Lewis v. Lewis, 1849. In 1858, he defended William Armstrong on the count of murder. He successfully defended his client after using a farmer's almanac to show on that day the moon was at a low angle, and witnesses could not have seen the event in detail. Slavery. Lincoln witnessed slavery firsthand while sailing down to New Orleans. It is said he took a vow to end slavery after seeing a beautiful Negro girl sold into slavery. Lincoln opposed slavery by often referring to the Declaration of Independence and the opening lines on the equality of men. Lincoln contended the Founding Fathers intended for slavery to die out and for the U.S. to aspire closer to this lofty goal of equality. In the 1850s, Lincoln opposed acts such as the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which could see the spread of slavery into free states. In the 1850s, Lincoln was not an abolitionist. He did not believe the Constitution allowed to interfere in the southern slaveholding states. However, he personally wished for all men to be free and denounced the extension of slavery into any new state. In 1857, Lincoln denounced the Supreme Court's decision in Dred Scott v. Sanford, arguing that Declaration of Independence did consider all men created equal in certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Quote, politics. From 1834 to 1842, Lincoln served as a Whig politician holding a seat in the Illinois state legislature. Lincoln's domestic policies included supporting internal improvements, government spending on infrastructure, such as canals, roads, and bridges. Lincoln quietly expressed support for giving women the vote at a time when it was rare. "I go for admitting all whites to the right of suffrage who pay taxes or bear arms, by no means excluding females." June 13, 1836, Sangamo Journal. 1847–49 he was a Whig member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Lincoln was critical of President Polk's actions over the Mexico War. This was politically costly for Lincoln. as many considered it unpatriotic to question the president's motives and action over the war. After 2 years in Congress, he decided not to re-stand for election in 1849 and returned to being a lawyer. In 1854, Lincoln ran for Senate as a Whig. Despite leading after 6 rounds, Lincoln asked his friends to vote for the anti-slavery Lyman Trumbull. Lincoln felt his withdrawal was necessary to beat the incumbent pro-slavery Democratic candidate. Trumbull would remember this act of political magnanimity, and he went on to co-author the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery. In 1858, Lincoln campaigned for Senate against Stephen Douglas. There were 7 major debates, which attracted large crowds. Douglas supported the extension of slavery. Lincoln opposed the extension. Although he lost this 1858 election, his performance impressed many in the new Republican Party. During the 1860 election for the Republican nomination, Lincoln was considered the outsider. He had little executive experience, serving only 2 years in the House of Representatives. In the 1860 presidential election, Lincoln was promoted as the rail splitter candidate. Lincoln's humble roots, coming from a log cabin and hard manual labor of splitting logs for rails, was used to portray their candidate as a man of the people, someone embodying the American dream. Quote, in the 1860 election, Lincoln won, becoming the first U.S. president from the Republican Party. In 1860, turnout was a record 82.2%. He won the Electoral College by 180 to 123, though received only 39% of the national vote. In the 1861 inaugural address, Lincoln made overtures to the South to prevent secession. As president, Lincoln vetoed only 4 bills passed by Congress. In 1861, Lincoln signed a bill for the first U.S. income tax of 3% on incomes over $800. Lincoln was responsible, in 1863, for making Thanksgiving a major U.S. holiday. In 1863, Lincoln approved the creation of the National Academy of Sciences. In 1864, Lincoln approved a grant and federal support for Yosemite Valley and the nearby Mariposa Big Tree Grove to be used for public recreation, later National Park. In 1864, Lincoln was re-elected in a landslide, receiving 78% of the Union soldiers' vote. Lincoln during the Civil War. Lincoln and his cautious General McClellan. Lincoln was determined to avoid firing the first shots in any civil war with the South. However, ignoring the advice of many in his cabinet, he also approved the federal Fort Sumter to be restocked, leading to the first skirmish of the war. In the early months of the war, Lincoln tread carefully to keep Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri and Delaware from joining the Confederacy. Lincoln said, "I hope to have God on my side, but I must have Kentucky." Quote, Lincoln assumed sweeping powers during the Civil War, taking a close interest in military issues as commander-in-chief. Lincoln's acts included a military draft, suspension of habeas corpus and the power to appoint generals. Lincoln avidly read many military manuals and became frustrated with generals, such as McClellan, who he considered too timid. During the Civil War, Lincoln was criticized by both Copperheads, Southern Democrats supportive of slavery in the South, and radical Republicans who wished to see the immediate abolition of slavery. In 1862, Lincoln stated the Civil War was primarily about defending the Union. "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or to destroy slavery." Quote, however, on September 22, 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation to free slaves in 10 states under Union control. The end of slavery now became a military objective. On signing the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln stated, "I never, in my life, felt more certain that I was doing right than I do in signing this paper." Quote, the Gettysburg Address, November 19. Lincoln spoke for just 3 minutes, saying 272 words. Lincoln was ill during the Gettysburg Address with an early stage of smallpox. At Gettysburg, a fellow Senator Edward Everett gave the main address, speaking before Lincoln for 2 hours and 13,607 words. In 1863 64, Lincoln appointed General Ulysses S. Grant to the command of the Union Army. Many criticized General Grant and spread rumors of his heavy drinking, but Lincoln, supportive of his general, reportedly stated, "Well, I wish some of you would tell me the brand of whiskey that Grant drinks. I would like to send a barrel of it to my other generals." Quote, Lincoln toured battlefields. On one occasion, Captain Oliver Wendell Holmes shouted at him, "Get down, you damn fool, before you get shot." Quote, Lincoln often showed compassion to deserters. He rarely allowed execution for desertion, overturning 75% of death sentences for desertion, rising to 95% by the middle of the war. Assassination. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated Good Friday, April 14, 1865, while attending a play at Ford's Theater. On the day of his death, Lincoln told his wife he wished to visit the Holy Land. Booth was a Confederate spy from Maryland, who was incensed when Lincoln supported voting rights for blacks in a speech the 11th of April 1865. Personal characteristics. Honest Abe. Abraham Lincoln gained the nickname of Honest Abe when his business partner died and Lincoln inherited his debts. Rather than flee town, as was common in the West, Lincoln remained and worked hard for several years to pay off his debts. Lincoln was widely considered a man of integrity, truth and conscience. In 1856, Walt Whitman denounced Northern, Eastern Democrats, stating he wished to vote for a presidential candidate who had the following characteristics. "I would be much pleased to see some heroic, shrewd, fully informed, healthy-bodied, middle-aged, beard-faced American blacksmith or boatman come down from the West across the Alleghenies." Quote, Lincoln rarely resorted to slogans, stereotypes and personal attacks in politics, but generally offered considerations developed from his reflections and reading. In the political sphere, Lincoln generally rejected equal voting rights for black voters. It was a minority political view in the 1860s. Frederick Douglass, who sometimes disagreed with Lincoln, nevertheless stated, "He treated me as a man. He did not let me feel for a moment that there was any difference in the color of our skins." Quote, religion. Lincoln loved to read the Bible. He never joined any particular church, though he did attend different churches with his wife, especially when president. Lincoln expressed belief in an all-powerful God, but no explicit profession of Christian beliefs. Unusual facts about Lincoln. On November 9, 1863, he saw the actor John Wilkes Booth, his eventual assassin, during a play, The Marble Heart, at Ford's Theater. In 1842, Abraham Lincoln almost fought a duel with swords with the Illinois State Auditor, James Shields. The duel never took place after friends intervened. On October 3, 1863, President Lincoln made the traditional Thanksgiving celebration a national holiday. After Lincoln was elected president in 1860, the King of Siam offered him a gift of elephants. Coincidences with the assassination of JFK and A. Lincoln. Both presidents were shot in the head on a Friday seated beside their wives. Lincoln was shot at Ford's Theater. Kennedy was shot in a Lincoln automobile, made by Ford. More coincidences. Labels applied to Lincoln. Spotty Lincoln, over Lincoln's desire to enforce President Polk to point to spot where the first conflict with Mexico actually occurred. Black Republican. During the 1858 Senate election, Lincoln was given the derogatory label, Black Republican, for his support for black Americans. The Great Emancipator. Father Abraham, for biblical reference to Abraham who led his people during the war. The Tycoon, for energetic leadership of Civil War. Uncle Abe, for his kindly, avuncular nature. Historical reputation. In scholarly ranking polls, Lincoln has been rated as the best president in a poll of polls, Washington Post.